C.S. Lewis is beloved for his Chronicles of Narnia series, but some people think his greatest work of fiction was convincing millions of American kids that they would love Turkish Delight. The confection is so delicious, he taught us in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that we would happily betray our families if only we could have a tin full of the stuff. One bit of collective trauma for us Gen X folks, alongside Artax succumbing to quicksand in the never-ending story, is trying store-bought Turkish Delight for the first time. It's really, really awful. One of the worst things. But it doesn't have to be that way. Once you try handmade Turkish Delight, you start to understand why Edmund cozied up to the White Witch, and if you could have just one more piece, maybe your siblings could stand getting knocked down a peg or two. We'll be using the recipe given in Casandra Reader's The Geeky Chef Cookbook. Her recipe is a simpler, perhaps more accessible recipe for the curious cook compared to more traditional recipes, in that it relies on gelatin to set the candy, rather than having to monitor sugar temperatures and wearing your arm out stirring in a cornstarch slurry. Here's what we need to begin. 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of gelatin. For me, that was about 1.5 packets. 1 3/4 cups of sugar. I use raw sugar in almost everything because I like that little bit of cane juice flavor. 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid. You can order this online and it will keep forever. I use it in place of lemon juice sometimes to keep apples and other cut fruit from turning brown. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. 2 teaspoons of rose water. This is the traditional flavoring, but it can be both polarizing and hard to find, so feel free to substitute with another flavoring of your choice. And 1/2 cup of shelled and chopped pistachios. Her recipe isn't clear if you measure them before or after shelling, but I like pistachios and measured just the chopped nuts. Our first step is to grease a 6x6 inch baking pan. This proved to be the most challenging item to acquire, as I didn't already have a pan that small, and none of my usual stores had one either. I ended up using this plastic storage container, which was exactly right. Place the water in a large saucepan and sprinkle over the gelatin. Let it sit until the gelatin becomes a bit springy. I don't know what that means exactly, but the gelatin box said to wait 2 minutes, so I just did that. Next, add the citric acid and the sugar to the gelatin water. Place the pan over gentle heat and stir constantly until everything is dissolved. Bring the mixture to a boil and let it go for 15 minutes without stirring. This step is crucial for getting the right consistency. Since we are using gelatin, we do not have to track the sugar temperature. You will, though, have to keep an eye on it and move it on and off the heat so it doesn't boil over, or risk a molten sugar mess all over your stovetop. After boiling, remove the pan from the heat and let it sit for 10 minutes. Then stir in the chopped pistachios, the rose water, or your preferred flavoring, and the vanilla extract. You may also want a few drops of food coloring to match your flavor choice. My raw sugar gave it all the color I need, so I'll skip that. Pour the mixture into the prepared pan and leave it uncovered in a cool place for 24 hours. If you put it in the fridge, make sure it has first come to room temperature to prevent it from sweating. The next day, we need 2 new ingredients: 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 1/4 cup of powdered sugar. Sift them together onto a sheet of parchment paper. Turn out the set Turkish Delight onto the paper and cut it into cubes using a sharp knife. Toss the pieces in the sugar cornstarch mixture so that all sides are coated. Finally, pack the squares into an airtight container lined with parchment paper and dust with the remaining sugar cornstarch mixture. And there you have it, your own batch of Turkish Delight. You don't have to serve it out of a fancy box, but it does seem to make it feel more magical if you do. But how does it taste? This treat is really, really good. Yes, it's sweet, but the flavors of rose and pistachio balance the sweetness quite nicely. My decision to use raw sugar instead of white also helps there, adding additional layers of flavor besides just sweet. The use of gelatin does change the texture somewhat compared to the traditional Turkish delights I've had from Middle Eastern bakeries. We found that the difference narrowed considerably after a couple of days, but we did find it hard to keep them around that long. The 4 of us here polished off the entire batch in only 3 days. Is it good enough to tempt you into betraying your siblings? Compared to the grocery store stuff, absolutely. You'll have to listen to your own heart, enjoy your homemade Turkish delight, and let it transport you to the magical world of Narnia, where you can decide for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure on the Random Recipe Project. Please like, subscribe, drop me a comment, and invite your friends along to join us on the next one. I'll see you then.